Over the next 3 days, I'm putting a new portrait lens to the test with some edgy urban street photography, environmental portraiture, and 2 indoor studio shoots to create 25 images in 12 minutes.
I'm so glad to share this.
Using the autofocus face detect for a close-up headshot, grabbing all that amazing detail. Thanks, mate. Shot with the 75p's widest aperture of f3.4 and zooming in, you can actually see my reflection in his eye. So I've found a beautiful composition here with the bridge going over Camden Lock in North London, and there's a patch of sky which I'm hoping to freeze a person right in the middle of. I'll need to be at 640th of a second to do it, and ISO 100. Wide open at f3.4 to get some nice separation. Yeah. Just putting my focus point right where that person will be walking past. Managed to capture this guy wearing headphones. Really pleased with how this image turned out. So here's a quick look at this new portrait lens from Hasselblad, the XCD 75p f3.4. It is simplicity, elegance, small, weighs roughly the same as a can of Coke, and takes the sharpest images known to humankind. Wow, this guy's voice is super impressive. River Atlee. Environmental portraits really suit this focal length, and cropping in reveals how it meets the requirements of the 100 megapixel sensor on the X2D camera. Now, Hasselblad call this lens an entry choice for portrait photographers. Now, that's not to say that this is an entry-level piece of glass, because none of the lenses coming off the Hasselblad production line are entry-level by no means. But what I think they're trying to do is make the brand more accessible to everyone and not just the elite photographers with high-end clients. So golden hour is fast approaching with some of those deep shadows. Let's go into the viewfinder, 800th of a second. Classic street photography here with that late afternoon sun and those long shadows. So I found another similar street scene here, and I find it's always better to have people facing towards the sun if at all possible. Spot focusing on the gap here, and moments later, a gentleman passing by. Perfect. So that was a pretty good day hitting the streets of North London with this new P lens. P stands for portable if you're interested, and it is the first lightweight portrait lens in the range with the widest aperture of f3.4, by the way. Let's see how it handles studio portraiture. Right, so day 2 here in the studio, and we have 2 really lovely girls to shoot. One of them is Liv Torkia and the other is Hope Davies. We will be heading outside to do some environmental portraits as well, but for this first image we're going proper moody using a hard box, which is basically a standard reflector with a black interior, homemade, do-it-yourself. This creates very hard light and is quite fashionable in modeling photography these days. And I'll be placing a flag, which is basically a piece of cardboard in between the light and the talent to create and block out a shadow on the right side of the face. And then head needs to come there. Fractions. So we do have a kicker light in the back to accent Liv's neck and shoulders to add a bit of dimension. Okay, Liv, ready? 1, 2, 3. So all of the shots in the studio today will be taken with an exposure triangle of f5.6, ISO 64 and 250th of a second. If you are a portrait photographer, you'll probably know about flash sync speeds. Well, because this is a leaf shutter on this lens, you're going to get sync speeds up to 2,000th of a second. Going for a similar image for Hope with a white background, this time without the flag or the kicker light. Absolutely, looks great. Very Vogue. Brilliant. Just one bare bulb strobe creates that high-end fashion look that you might see in magazines. Okay, just relax onto it. Yeah, it feels a bit like, oh, I'm posing. Yeah. Using a large rice bowl modifier and curved reflector, you can achieve those lovely catch lights in the eyes. So going with a classic 3 light setup here, overhead rice bowl and 2 hair lights. So here's a 3/4 length shot versus a full length shot. Now the 75p has a full frame equivalent of 59mm, and I'd say that's a pretty perfect length for portrait work, because not only can it handle close-up headshots without distortion, it can also handle full-length portraits when you're in smaller studios like this. I'm probably 10-11 feet from the talent and I can get all of her in the frame. A bit more. Nice. 1, 2, 3. Using grids on your softboxes can really define and shape the face. Never had a picture taken professionally. What? Right, so we're heading outside now to do some environmental portraits to see how this lens handles bright sunlight conditions. Having 3 extra low dispersion elements and an aspherical element inside, chromatic aberration and color fringing should be all but non-existent. So using the sunlight hitting the wall on the left as bounce fill for Liv's face, really soft light here. This shot without the bounce sunlight would have required some kind of external light source like a speed light.
Okay, when you're ready, Liv.
Using the sunlight blasting through the overpass windows of this railway station. Now I would have preferred to frame Liv a bit more central here, but you can't win them all. The branches of this tree are really producing some nice mottled sunlight. 500th of a second is giving me good exposure. Using the hanging tree branches to my advantage here, creating shadows and bringing focus to Liv's face. Let's just bring the ISO down to 100 and shutter is 800th in this dazzling afternoon sun. So my advice when shooting in direct sunlight is to angle the face away from the sun, creating a shadow down the laughter line. So we've got a slightly different composition now with cloudier conditions. The lower f-stop of f3.4 gives us nice foreground blur, isolating the talent. So here in the studio today for an editorial style shoot, we have a very talented actor called Isaac Rouse, and you may have seen him in a small little TV show called The Crown on Netflix. Isaac, what have you been up to?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on. I've been doing bits and bobs. Last 6 months I've been focusing on short film specifically, and doing some writing gigs, industries, pits and troughs, as you know.
So what we're doing here is an editorial style shoot outside and inside here in the studio. For this first setup we have a moody indoor shot mixing ambient light with flash. Ambient light's coming from the wall lights and the table lamp, and there's a touch of spill light coming in from outside which we can control with the drapes. Overhead we have our key light which is shooting through a grid, and on that key light is a half-cut CTO gel to match the color of the wall light. Same too with the strip light over here, which is a kicker light for the side of his face, and that's got a half-cut CTO gel on it as well, and that's going to mimic the lights coming from the wall. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. And then maybe just looking away from the camera. Even at ISO 1600, the camera and lens produces a beautiful clean texture with pleasing grain. So we're at 1/128th power on the speed light just above here, and shooting through a grid again. Wide open at f3.4 to test out the beautiful bokeh on this lens with the twinkle lights in the background. Nice. See how close we can get. I think we can get to 1/2 meter. Ooh, no, it's just there. That's as close as we can get. The minimum focus distance on this 75p is a respectable 55 centimeters, which is probably too close for portraits. Good for still life though. So I'm using what's called the inverse square law here, which is to do with light fall off and distance from the light source. And we can get some really deep shadows in those cheekbones with this technique. You can see how close the key light is to Isaac's face, probably what, 10 inches away. And that's what gives us massive amounts of fall off Wow. And go for one light again, high and forward of Isaac. Sometimes one light is all you need to create moody portraits like these. Once again, light source here using that hard box, and the result is incredible cheekbone definition. So what I'm attempting to do here is a stylistic slow shutter speed shot where I slow the shutter down to 1/5 of a second, and then I'm going to get Isaac to stand in the middle of the road in a safe place, obviously. And any traffic that whizzes by in front or behind him will have motion blur, and he'll have to remain as still as he can because I'm at 1/5 of a second. And because the X2D medium format camera has such good image stabilization, I can do this handheld. One over 1/5 of a second is a sweet spot for moving traffic. This image was taken with a passing lorry. Yeah. So what I'm attempting to do here is an action shot, kind of like the Matrix, you know, with the coat wafting behind Isaac. It's very dark down this alleyway, so ISO 1600 and shutter speed will need to be above 500th of a second or motion blur will come into play. Sweet. Ooh. It turned out a pretty dynamic environmental portrait. If you prefer, here's one less Keanu Reeves. Yeah, just angle the head into the light a touch. Let's just get in tight here. Wide open again at f3.4. Here's another example of that movie-like background bokeh that can be achieved with this lens. Now, I've got to say, I do love the focal range on this 75p. For portraits, it's nigh on perfect. Close-up, mid-range, full length, and f3.4 gives us enough background blur while keeping the detail that you need for environmental portraits. Bokeh, I would say, is comparable to the much heavier and larger XCD 65. In fact, it's almost half the weight. As a pure street photography lens, it has all the qualities that you need. And as for looks and build quality with this engraved logo focus ring, just exudes class.